Welcome back to Canadians Leading with Impact. I'm Kevin Crone, and today we are talking with Matt Norman and discussing this book, Lead with Influence. And if you know me and the work that we do, and if you've been around our team, you know we've been talking about this book and its concepts and ideas to support leaders. And we're so excited to be talking to you, Matt.
Yeah, Kevin, you're a great friend and leader and encourager in my life. So I'm happy to be here.
I love to get into this. Lead with influence, a proven process to lead even without authority is the subtitle. And all your work, again, to give people context, your work, your team's work, working with organizations and leaders for decades, great teams, cultures, tapping into people's potential, and then working with organizations. You must have saw this lead with influence, the idea of this as an opportunity of some kind, an unaddressed need in organizations. Could you share what your vision was, or how did this arrive?
Yeah. I'll start with some recency bias from a call that I just had with the vice president of infrastructure and operations within IT
Mm,
at a technology company. The company that they work in supports the US federal government on uh, some of the Department of Education activities. And so they have this web-based platform that the Department of Education uses, and then they have students that are accessing this website. The infrastructure and operations team is critical for the reliability and the availability and the credibility of the Department of Education and of all these students that are accessing this portal. If they have a cyber security issue, or if the website's down, or if the call center that people are calling doesn't have the technology that they can, to be able to pull up people's accounts and things like that. I mean, it's really a significant issue. And so there's millions of dollars and eyeballs that are all dependent. And the infrastructure and operations team is really responsible for ensuring that's all available and reliable.
mm,
And yet, the IT group, and specifically this infrastructure and operations team, is often at odds with other teams
mm,
within the organization. In fact, we were specifically on a call talking about how the vice president of infrastructure and operations in IT is misaligned with the CFO of the company
mm.
on budget spend.
Right.
And as you start to get a glimpse into the way that their meetings are unfolding, you realize that while they have this shared objective around supporting the Department of Education and the students, the IT and infrastructure team is coming at the conversations through the lens of IT. And the CFO is coming at the conversation through the lens of finance. And they have, to a degree, for their own functional areas, competing priorities and competing perspectives and views of the world.
Mm,
And they miss often an opportunity to collaborate and align and frankly influence one another
mm,
because they are entrenched in their own functional perspective. And so the realization that inspired the book
mm,
is that when when we are limited in our ability to see the big picture and to really understand, empathize, and connect with people that don't see the world the same way we do, even though we're in the same organization,
mm,
we limit our influence.
mm,
And so the coaching with this particular vice president, a very high level leader who's very, very competent at running IT and infrastructure, is to
mhm,
say, how do I demonstrate the vulnerability to be in a conversation, and instead of advocating and promoting for IT and infrastructure's needs, to listen and ask questions of the
mm,
CFO to find out what he's trying to achieve and what's important to him, and then trying to map priorities to the goals of finance rather than defending the goals
Mm.
of IT and infrastructure, infrastructure and operations. And a big part of that is by aligning to the bigger picture, which is, hey, this is what we're trying to do for the Department of Education and for
Mm.
students. And so the whole book is really about helping people bridge those gaps that they are often created because of a lot of functional expertise, a lot of subject matter expertise, a lot of uh, desire to reduce our own vulnerability in these conversations by just proving how much we know or trying to advocate for our priorities. The book is really to help bridge those gaps and help people to see the big picture, communicate in terms of other people's priorities.
So often, from our own point of view, or our department's point of view, or our own mandate, we're just locked in to the day to day, our our department's objectives and mandates that we can lose sight of the bigger picture. You call this being a palace builder. Incidentally, I've also observed you've been using this analogy for a long time in different meetings that we've been in together. And that's been a big part of your thinking as well. And so this is to help people realize we can get stuck in the day to day, the tyranny of the urgent. And if we see what is the palace that we want
Yeah.
to build and how do we partner more effectively together, even
Mhm.
with competing priorities. How does that sound?
You think about most plumbers, most mechanical contractors,
Right.
most carpenters, most electricians. They go to a job site and they're showing up to do their job, right?
Right.
And that's to be expected because that's what they're being paid to do and that's what they're good at.
Mm,
It's the rare contractor that comes to a job site and looks around and thinks or asks, what are we trying to do here?
yeah.
Who's going to live here?
Mm,
What's what are some of the goals of the people who own this place
mm,
in building this house or this structure? How does it fit into the neighborhood? What's trending in this neighborhood right now?
mm,
What was the architect trying to do when she was creating the plans? That would be a rare thing for a contractor to do that.
right.
And yet, well, first, not only would it be rare, it would be vulnerable, right? Because that contractor would be exposing themselves to maybe things outside of their domain,
Mm,
maybe losing a little bit of time on the job because that might take a few minutes to ask those questions or to do some of that thinking. And most contractors are billing by their hourly rate, and so they need to get right down to business. And so it's a risk. It's vulnerable to take a few minutes and look around and ask, what are we trying to do here? What are
mm,
some of the goals of the owners of this place?
mm,
And yeah, you think about from the vantage point of an owner or from another contractor, if a contractor did that appropriately, obviously, ultimately, you want to make sure they did their job. You don't want them just floating around the property, never doing what they were hired to do. But if they took a couple minutes to ask a few questions and find out, what are we trying to, what's the goal here, and how does this fit in, and then maybe even tied their work to that, oh, that's interesting. I'm really excited how my electrical work it's really going to help you achieve that ambiance of lighting that you're looking to, because you really want your place to be an inviting home. I think some of the specifications around lighting that we designed are really going to help do that. You would really connect with that electrician, right? You'd really feel like, oh, that's an electrician that I want to work with in the future and who
mhm.
really understands me. And maybe if you had questions as an owner, you would be, of all the contractors I'm going to go talk to, I'm going to go talk to the electrician. Even if I have a question outside of their domain, I may
Right.
go ask them a carpentry question because they demonstrated that they have a broader understanding. And so it's like that contractor who can do that rare and vulnerable thing, even if
Mm,
it's just for a few minutes,
mm,
achieves a level of influence without authority. They don't have necessarily the authority to do that, but they achieve a level of influence that really cascades into a lot of different ways.
yeah. And builds trust and or trusted advisor, like relationship, even though that's when we're talking about something like plumbing. All things being equal, we're going to work with or call people that we really trust,
Yeah.
and like you said, even if it's outside the domain.
Yeah. And
So
sometimes we may trust someone just because they're nice or because they do good work. I
right.
mean, those are certainly, yeah, hey, I like this plumber, he was friendly, he was timely, he was
Mm,
professional, he did good craftsmanship, and those are all factors, not to minimize those factors, but those are more of a commodity. I mean, often we can differentiate ourselves by being nicer than the other guy.
yeah.
But the craftsmanship is usually pretty much a commodity. The pricing is usually pretty much a commodity.
Mm,
Most people that have survived for a while in their craft have learned to get along with people at a basic level. So how do we differentiate ourselves and create that level of trust that's really going to make the people that are hiring us or that are working for us or partnering with us really want to work with us? That differentiator, that superpower, so to
mm,
speak, would be the ability to really show that we have broader understanding and empathy of the water that we're
mm.
swimming in, the
Yeah,
neighborhood that we're building in.
yeah, yeah, right on. There's two things there that you often talk about Patrick Lencioni's work around five dysfunctions of a team. There's two kinds of trust: predictability based trust and vulnerability based trust. And what you're talking about there is that predictability based trust, competent and reliable,
Mm,
but also could be um, commodity.
yeah,
It's important to be competent and reliable in our work, and that it's important, but also adding that vulnerability based trust that you're describing there.
yeah.
When working with organizations, you're not just suggesting the books. I know you put these core concepts and you practice and coach and work with teams to really um, consider these ideas and strategies, mindsets and tool sets. Uh, you've seen it in real time over and over again with organizations working with thousands of people. What are some of the big ahas that happen
Mm,
along the way? And what are your observations that you're
mm,
like, wow, you see a shift happening in their approach of working with people, partnering with
mm.
others?
Yeah, yeah. I'd say three things. One is so simply how we set the table for a conversation.
Mm,
I mean, from the very beginning of a conversation
mm,
or a meeting,
right.
we can create signals to people
Mm,
that this is going to be a tactical, transactional conversation about the plumbing or about the IT and infrastructure,
yeah.
or we can signal that this is going to be a strategic, bigger picture conversation that may include some plumbing conversation, but also aligns to the overall objectives of the house that we're building
Mm,
or of the technology that supports the Department of Education. So we can set the table one way or another. And
mm,
most meetings pretty quickly devolve into the transactional,
mm,
tactical
mm,
conversations. And
mhm,
if that happens early on in a conversation, it's harder to get out of that. We can still try to bring it back to what matters, the why, the big picture that's going to really motivate and align people. But it's
mm,
harder. It's more common that once we start going to the tactical, we retreat into our functional or domain priorities. And
yeah.
now we realize that if there's a mismatch in priorities or expectations, now we have some friction or conflict or misalignment. So we just setting the table the right way. I think second
Yeah.
is asking questions, is the default posture we typically have
Mm,
is to want to defend, advocate,
mm,
explain.
mm,
It's it's so hard for us as human beings to resist that temptation to defend, advocate, or explain,
mm,
and to just pause and say, "Wow, sounds like you feel strongly about that.
mm,
Say more. You know
mhm,
what is it that is driving that priority for you, or w- tell me more about what you want to accomplish with this." And if we can
mm,
just if we can train ourselves,
mm,
um, I like to say great influencers train themselves to restrain themselves
mm,
before they explain themselves, right?
Oh man. Yeah.
And then finally, when we do explain ourselves, the third aha is that once we start explaining ourselves, so often we want to tell the whole story. We want to explain everything. You know, it's sort of like my 11-year-old daughter, who I love, is still at an age where if she's really excited about a book or a movie,
Mm,
she'll tell you everything and it'll go for 7 or 8 minutes.
yeah.
And, we have to be patient and try to gently nudge her to land the plane as she's explaining it.
Yeah, of course.
But there's something in all of us, whether we're 11 or whatever age, that wants to explain the whole story. It's like we're in front of the jury or the judge and we want to give all the arguments of the case, because
Mm,
we want to make sure that before the jury decides, they've heard it all, right?
mm,
And yet the risk in that we know is just the same risk of my daughter telling me about a movie is that we lose attention, we become impatient,
right.
we forget things that they said 2 minutes ago,
Yeah.
and so
We've
rather
lost the
than,
audience way back.
yeah,
We don't even
right,
know. You're right.
right. So rather than a download shifting to a dialogue,
Mm,
right? Rather than download shifting to a dialogue. And so
mm,
that's the other thing is how do I just condition myself to pause every 60 to 90 seconds and
mm,
allow the other person to catch up and respond and
mm,
interject. And that too is vulnerable
mm,
because everything we're talking about is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to let the other person have the floor, right? Have the microphone. It's much more, it feels like, well, it feels anyway, like we're mitigating risk
mm.
by controlling the
Right.
conversation, right? So those would be three big ahas.
Oh, yeah. I relate to that as I'll often apologize. I apologize. An enthusiastic sharer of ideas.
Yeah.
I have to remember to restrain myself before I over explain myself. And
Well, even me, I mean, as you asked me that question, I realized, well, I just went through all three of those ideas without pausing, and so I
yeah,
think we
well,
rationalize it. Well, I think, well, I'm on a podcast right now and
yeah,
you're
yeah,
interviewing me, so I should go through all three, but maybe not. I mean,
yeah.
I fall victim to it too. I probably should
Uh,
have paused after each of those ideas and invited some reaction from you.
well, it just speaks to what a discipline that is. For the most aware, to be cognizant and trying to sell the idea that that's a great thing. But I really love the idea in there of we think we're mitigating risk by over explaining, but really it's risking disengagement.
Yeah,
The discipline or the brave might check in and go, how is this landing with
yeah,
you? Or let me pause here. How is this resonating with you
right.
so far? Because it might open a can of worms
Yeah.
that we may not even mentally be prepared for.
It's fast is slow, slow is fast, right?
Yeah,
But if I
that's
try to just plow forward because I'm busy, I'm in a hurry, I know the answer, I'm going to end up going slower because people are going to drag their feet and they're going to, versus if I just take a little time up front to pause, let them interject. Now we just like you said, now we're going together. Now I have you with me. So now we can go faster.
I love that. Slow is fast, fast is slow. I'm sure you've heard this over the years as I have, as we're come to a point and we're talking about, okay, as a leader here, as an influencer versus just a doer, am I going to think about building relationships differently or thinking about my interactions, build build greater trust and making commitments to that all. And sometimes you'll hear someone joke but not really. I don't have time to be interested or
Yeah.
or to listen or ask questions. I don't have time. Like, what are you
Right.
talking about? Like,
Right.
I'm under a lot of pressure, don't you know?
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
a lot to
Yeah.
do, and
And that's real, right? I
it's
mean, time
real.
time is a real thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that would read a book like this and say, well, under different circumstances, working for a different boss or in a less demanding job, I could
right,
do things like that.
right, right.
Yeah.
It's
which
a
may
circle.
be partially reality, cooperating with the inevitable, but also maybe something that we're too fatalistic about, or we're too
Mm,
victimized by,
mm,
too much of an external locus of control.
mm,
And rather, maybe we need to shift that and say, no, I'm gonna regain my internal locus of control and say,
mm,
I'm gonna make a little bit of time for things
mm,
that are gonna matter most, and ultimately help me to move faster in the long run.
mm. That's interesting. You bring up internal locus of control. That comes up organically in conversations with our clients when we're in doing this work. They will begin to go, huh, you know, this isn't about my circumstances, the pressures, the changes, challenges that I'm going through my organization. This is about who I am and who I choose to be and what can I control within there. And am I a palace builder or am I a doer? And what's more fun and what's more meaningful and what gives me joy? And so I see those switches turn on. Um, and I love how we frame it right at the beginning there, doer mode and influencer mode. So we're not talking tactical things here to get things done through others. What we're talking about is identity, choosing who we are. Uh, do I choose to be an influencer? Creating value, for our stakeholders, and that's a huge aha. I see. Just that naturally comes out of this. Being influential is a choice. How and we're influencing all the time. In other words, what are we influencing? And are we the palace builders? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
That's
think the way you frame that, seeing ourselves differently is so important. The way we see ourselves, that
mm,
mental shift has to occur for us to
mm,
apply these approaches, right? Because if we fundamentally see ourselves as a doer
mm,
or an order taker,
mm,
um, and by the way, even sometimes I think our minor language use
mm,
can reinforce this. Another thing that I was just working with this vice president of infrastructure who I mentioned
mm,
in the technology team, was talking with the CFO using a lot of I versus you language, or us, our team in IT versus your team in finance.
mm,
And we talked about changing his pronouns to be more inclusive,
mm,
to say, we together can collaborate to achieve these outcomes.
mm,
Let's talk about it this way.
mm,
And I we discovered together that those I versus you pronouns
mm,
were subtly reinforcing the optics and even the internal perception
mm,
that we are a doer for your team. We
mm,
are an enabler for your team. We are an order taker for your team.
mm,
As opposed to switching to the inclusive
mm,
we implies we're partners, we're collaborators, we're
mm.
influencers of each other. So it's just so interesting and like subtle how pervasive thinking of ourselves or creating the perception of ourselves as an order taker can be.
Mhm. That's how subtle, um, or how subtle that is, can be incredibly influential. One is anything that's I oriented is very directive, authoritative,
Mm,
even without authority. Um, but just shifting that to let's
mm,
build something, we can build something or collaborate, just sends a different uh, signal
mm,
altogether. Uh, Sets the table as a word, and it's such a subtle, and it comes more from our. you know who we're choosing to be or how I'm choosing to show up. It's not a skill. It's probably a discipline, um, but it's more of a choice, you know. And
Mhm.
so at different points, sometimes I find myself saying, by far, the most important, one of the most important things we can do is decide who we choose to be here
Yeah,
versus
that's
what
so
we're
good.
going to do. And that usually comes out of inspiration of moments of when people are communicating that way or and I get all wrapped up in the excitement of the
Mhm.
power of that, the choice of that. And everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, right on," you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how our words and our actions are a reflection and reinforcement of our identity.
Really, it really is.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this work. I think it's important work. I remember, if I may finish with a, I know we both enjoy Daniel Pink's work
Mm.
and all his work that to sell is human and um, drive and when and I remember I was in a crowd with a bunch of executives and CEOs and founders, and Daniel was there to speak, and so we are excited to hear him talk about anything. Daniel's a He's a researcher, thinker, writer, and a share speaker of those insights and strategies. And he was particularly talking about to sell as human with this group, and he posed the question up front to everyone after the hello. He said, how much time to all these executives, how much time do you suppose percentage of your time goes to trying to persuade, sell, influence? And he allowed people to contemplate it. Let me hear some numbers. And he spot checked the room of hundreds of these guys and people, all these leaders, and they were coming up with 90% of the time. Some were saying 100%, others were like 50, 30. They're all brainstorming. How much time do I actually spend trying to really persuade, influence, collaborate, motivate? And so his work, his research was, do you know this? Do you know you do. You know,
I can't remind me.
yeah, yeah. I thought maybe it'd be on the tip of your tongue. He said it's 41% of the time for the average professional to spend contemplating, working at, or trying to influence and sell, propose. And then he asked everybody, how much time have you spent working on your ability, or how much training or coaching, or have you even thought of working on your ability to influence, motivate, and heart, and people's their answer was not much time at all. And
So you started handing out your business cards.
I wanted to leap up and go, what the, are you kidding me? Right. And I thought he was teeing me up, well, we got Kev here and Dale Carney, and but he was just making the point that, I mean, how can that be? All these successful business people, leaders in the crowd here, building great organizations and doing great work, and they spent such little time uh, contemplate working on their own personal ability to be influential.
Hmm.
Isn't that fascinating? Like, isn't that a fascinating,
It is.
uh, you
It's
know?
fascinating. Yeah. Well, and I wonder if a defense from many in the room would be that they got to where they are
Yeah,
because they found ways to get their way.
yeah.
And a
Mhm.
lot of those ways probably included leveraging their power,
Mm,
their personality, their charisma, their position,
mm.
maybe even some elements of coercion. And, you know, those can be ways to get to influence also.
Yeah.
But the question is, what's the most sustainable trust building
Mhm.
approach?
Right.
And will leveraging my position, my title, my charisma, my intellect be the most sustainable? Sometimes that's appropriate and it can work. There are political and business leaders, other leaders that find ways to have success over some periods of time by doing that. But
Mhm.
I think you and I are in the philosophy that we want to build our trust building and sustainable
Mhm.
approaches to influence as opposed to
Mhm.
um, leveraging some of those other more hard approaches to influence.
That's right. Well, an idea I often have is I might be able to get away with influencing with authority, and I think I am getting away with that in the moment, in the trying to get something done, um, but I'm probably not really getting away with it.
Yeah, I'm
You know?
alienating somebody.
Yeah,
I'm leaving someone behind.
unbeknownst to myself.
Yeah,
Um, it might be not clear to me now, but it might come back to haunt or
yeah,
bite us later. And so we're not getting away with it.
right, right.
We're not. And so, um, what is a way that we can build sustainable trust and
Yeah,
collaboration? And
yeah.
your work,
Maximize the engagement of everybody around the idea, right? Not just get our way, but how do I get the most
yeah,
people fully engaged in this idea?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's that shows up as the um, the graphic of the book here.
yeah,
Is getting the best out of like it get the greatest engagement out of everyone here,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I suspect when people read this, they'll see all kinds of ways, and when
Mm.
they engage in the work that we do, they will. Matt, it's been awesome talking to you about this. Always great talking to you, but awesome talking to you, and thank you for sharing and being here with us on our pod, and as always, it's enlightening. Your crystallized thinking. The other thing I always, one time, a good friend of ours in an audience at one of our owners' meetings, as you were speaking, I can't remember what it was about, but he turned to me as you're talking. He said, "One day I'm going to learn to communicate like Matt." And I said, "Yeah, me too." you know, and um, and others notice that too. You think Matt has a talent to communicate and inspire, but I'm pretty sure there's a ton of hard work that's underneath there, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And I know on today our podcast we're just seeing the tip of an iceberg. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Kevin. It's an
Yeah.
honor. It really is. And it's an effort.
Well, thank you. Of course, we'll have the links in our bio here, mattnorman.com, and a little bit more about Lead with Influence. And I encourage everybody to follow Matt and get his great insights. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks again, Kev.